Yeah, that one could go move around. Oh, you want to move this one around? Okay, then we'll take this.
Sit up, 那个没 sit up 好，好像还没 sit up。Okay.
Okay, anybody have any questions, comments? Okay.
Bhante, there's a question from the internet asking whether Arhan has a mental painful feeling or mental pleasant feeling, body pleasant feeling.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, the question is whether an arahant has, let's put it this way, which of these 5 types of feelings does an arahant have? Okay, arahants will certainly have the feelings of pleasure and pain. Those are purely bodily feelings. So as long as one has the body, if an arahant should sit down on a chair with a thumbtack on it, he'll feel pain. If he touches a hot stove, he's going to feel pain. If he has a pleasant, soft robe, when he puts it on, he'll feel bodily pleasure. Okay, so he has pleasure and pain. He'll have the feeling called joy, that's somanassa. For example, if he reflects on the Dhamma, then he'll have joy. If he thinks of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, he'll have joy. If he enters, certainly when he enters into the jhanas, at least the 3 lower jhanas, then he'll have the pleasant mental feeling, which is somanassa, or joy. And he'll certainly have equanimity. I have to mention also that equanimity here is used in the sense of a feeling. This is different from equanimity used as a mental quality, meaning balance of mind. So equanimity as balance of mind means not being upset by what is painful, what is disagreeable, not being elated by what is pleasant or joyful. So that's equanimity as balance of mind. But the word upekkha is also used in the sense of a feeling, which is called equanimity. This is the same as feeling which is neither painful nor pleasant. And so the arahat will have equanimity a lot of the time in his normal consciousness. And certainly when he goes into the 4th jhana, or the higher meditative absorptions, then the feeling that accompanies those meditative absorptions is the feeling that's neither painful nor pleasant. In other words, equanimity. So the arhat has 4 of these types of feelings. The one that the arhat doesn't have is sadness, which takes the form of dejection, sorrow, grief, stress, worry. Well, worry is more a mental quality. Sorrow, grief, misery, dejection, all of those states are permanently eradicated by the arhat. Yes.
Whether it's a feeling or, a higher jhanic state.
Okay. So she asked, how do I make the distinction between equanimity?
I thought this was a jhana, like you
whether
were
it's
talking about.
Excuse me?
I thought you were talking about a jhanic state when you had written equanimity, because I've
When I
never
wrote it
known
on the board.
as a feeling. I've always thought of it as in Buddhism in terms
as
of
that mental quality of mental balance. So she asked how I make that distinction. Generally, in most of the texts that we read, when upekkha or equanimity is mentioned, then it's to be considered a mental quality, a quality connected with volition. For example, in the third and fourth jhana, it speaks about that the meditator experiences equanimity. The texts also, they speak about what's called the sixfold equanimity. This is equanimity through the six senses, that whether one experiences agreeable or disagreeable forms, agreeable or disagreeable sounds, odors, tastes, touch sensations, mental objects, the mind is not shaken, not knocked off balance. So that's equanimity as a mental quality. Also in the divine abodes, the Brahmaviharas, sometimes called the immeasurable states of mind. Equanimity means regarding all beings equally, like not having a preference for those that one's friends, not having any kind of hostility towards those who are hostile to oneself, but looking at people looking at people equally with equanimity. Again, that's equanimity as a mental quality. But the texts do speak of this feeling which is neither painful nor pleasant, and that's included amongst the 5 types of feeling under the name equanimity. I think one will find that defined as such. Certainly, I think in the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 48, where they speak about the 5 types of feelings. I'm just curious whether it occurs in the Majjhima Nikaya. I think it's implied in a passage in Sutta number 137. The text speaks about it actually starts with on page 1067. It speaks about 6 kinds of joy based on the household life or the worldly life, and 6 kinds of joy based on renunciation, then 6 kinds of grief or sadness based on the household life, and 6 kinds of grief or sadness based on renunciation, then 6 kinds of equanimity based on the household life, and 6 kinds of equanimity based on renunciation. And then it analyzes them over the following pages. So since here equanimity is paired with joy and with sadness, then it seems clear that it's a feeling. Yeah, anyway, I think that there are enough suttas here and there that support the idea of equanimity as a feeling. And this certainly becomes evident when we get to the Abhidhamma, which gives very precise definitions of these states. And there, equanimity is defined in some contexts as the feeling of neither painful nor pleasant feeling, in other contexts as the state of mental balance. Yes, Bahoy. Please take the microphone.
I just have a couple of points that need to be clarified. So you mentioned mind element, and
Yeah.
is mind element the same as mind faculty?
I think one would say that the mind faculty is more inclusive, that the mind faculty could actually include both, in terms of the elements, both the mano dhatu, the mind element, and the mano vijnana dhatu, the mind consciousness element. In fact, if I remember, in the Abhidhamma system, the mind faculty is said to include all types of consciousness. But that seems to me, I have some questions about that. But it might not be, maybe we can't press for distinctions which are overly precise in relating the mind faculty to the scheme of the elements. But my opinion would be, if anybody were interested, that the mind faculty could include both the mind element and the mind consciousness element.
So Bhante, in I element, but is I element the same as I faculty, or it's just the my element is exceptional?
I think it's just that the I element would be the same as the I faculty. The other 5 faculties and the elements, their corresponding elements are the same. It's just that it seems mind faculty would have a broader range, including the mind element and mind consciousness element.
And you say at the sutra level, the mind element is not a physical basis? It's
It's never
mental?
spoken of as a physical basis. But, it's simply not it's not defined in the suttas. The suttas just speak about how based on mind, on mano, and based on, say, dhammas, on mental objects, there arises mano vijnana dhatu, mind consciousness element. But what exactly is meant by mind here, mano, it's not defined. But as the tradition develops to explain these terms more precisely, the mind here, which is the basis for mind consciousness element, is always taken to be a kind of mind, a kind of mental activity, not a physical organ. And then later, when we get to, in the Abhidhamma text, then they speak about a distinct type of rupa, material phenomena, on the basis of which mind and mind consciousness element arise. And then the commentaries identify that special type of rupa, material phenomena, which what they call the heart base, which is supposed to be a subtle kind of matter in the region of the heart. And that is taken to be the physical basis for consciousness. But that is not identified with the mano, with mano dhatu, with the mind element.
And Bhante, on the board, you write there are 6 mind element or 7. What's that 7th one?
Say again?
I think you put on the board, say
Yeah.
there are 6 or 7.
Types of consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because when we take the 18, the 18 elements, if we just look at the column of consciousness, then we see 6 kinds of consciousness. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and so on, to mind consciousness element. But then under the middle column, where we have generally the faculties, then we have eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and then we have Manodhātu. And so Manodhātu is identified with particular types of consciousness, particular chittas. So then we bring that under consciousness as well, and that way we get 7 types of consciousness. The 6 that are specifically called types of consciousness and the mind element. Is that confusing? Still confusing.
And Bhante, if we take the Manodhātu to be pure mental, then would that be in conflict with let's say independence of the mentality and Namarupa, Paticca, and there is consciousness? So that consciousness would have no physical base, but you say it's used the heart as the physical base?
Yeah, I mean that's the way the commentarial tradition explains the physical basis for consciousness.
But it's not recorded in the sutta at all.
The sutta doesn't explain what mano is and doesn't speak about a physical basis for consciousness. Because I think it's not the task of the suttas to go into such minute detail or technical detail.
But Bhante, if no physical basis is mentioned in the sutta, I would think in your inference that at the sutta level, the Manodhātu would be physical instead of mental. It's just the opposite, right? I mean,
yeah.
So what's your reason for thinking that Manodhātu is mental from the sutta's perspective?
Because it's never specified as being a type of rupa, a kind of material phenomena.
And are these dhatus elements dependent, originated?
They're all dependently originated, yeah. Maybe next time we'll see where they fit into dependent origination. Because next time we have a section on dependent origination.
And you say the aggregate of feeling, volitional formations, and perceptions are included in the Dhammadhātu, right? So, but the Dhammadhātu, the contents of Dhammadhātu, in addition to these 3 aggregates, what else are included? All the input from the first 5 sense faculties?
No, the input from the sense faculties, what would be in the Dhammadhātu, apart from the other three aggregates, would be the objects of mind consciousness element. Those would be purely mental objects, ideas, concepts, judgments, and so forth. And a few other things, but I don't want to get into so much technical detail, it gets a little confusing. Okay, I think I saw Victor in the back. Let's pass that microphone all the ways to the last row.
Hello. Bhante, yeah, I just wanted to confirm one thing. The advantage of learning all these precise components of the five aggregates and learning like in the Abhidhamma, all the precise components of the chittas, etc. is for us is to learn that we're just a combination of these components, and therefore like it kind of helps us to see that kind of helps us not to identify with this as much, right? That's what we gotta like keep that in mind in our everyday experience.
Yeah.
And I guess every day we just kind of try to analyze every experience as much as we can through all of this, right? So
Yeah, that's a good point. Like one could use this kind of analysis to help like overcome unwholesome emotions that might arise. Okay, like somebody, say gets angry with you or scolds you, or now I don't face this so much, but back in the 1970s, when I was in the US as a monk, I used to face it when walking down the street, people, usually not people on the street, but people driving by, would shout like, "Why don't you put on some decent clothes?" What is that, a guy or a dame? So the initial reaction is to get angry at them, or to get upset. So then one just can analyze this in terms of elements. Okay, so here is sound element, impinging on the ear element. Then there arises ear consciousness. Then there arises, based on the ear consciousness, a mind consciousness element interpreting the saying. And so in this way, when one analyzes the experience in terms of elements, one doesn't take it personally.
Right.
Because it's just relating to an impersonal or a selfless combination or collection of elements.
Right.
Similarly, if somebody praises one, or one meets some kind of fortune, then one doesn't get delighted and attached to it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I want to confirm. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, see you, and then Stephen.
Bhante, in this, the 6 elements we have here, so why does a person skilled in elements would have ignorance, and how does actually, in a practical sense, how does one know and see the ignorance element?
Well, I think this is speaking sort of let me put this in a non-particular way, so that a person, even if the person is an arahant, he won't have ignorance within himself, but he'll still understand that there are these 6 elements within experience. Even the arahant won't have the experience of sadness, that type of feeling. But still he'll understand that these are 6 states of mind or qualities of mind that arise in people, even if it doesn't arise within himself. And of course, if somebody is below that level, even if the person could still be described as a wise person, but there'll be occasions when that wise person can recognize the arising of ignorance, just as he could recognize the arising of pleasure and pain. Even though ignorance is more subtle, it's not as obvious as pleasure and pain.
So how would you say a wise person should recognize the arising of
The what?
how should you say a wise person should recognize the arising of ignorance at a practical level? Is it like identifying with these things, like the example you gave earlier?
Yeah, I think one could say that that's one example, or even the cases of reacting with delight and with attachment when one meets with things that are considered desirable, praise, honor, glory, and so on. When one delights in that and becomes attached to it, one can recognize what lies behind that is the element of ignorance, because first one is identifying with, at least subtly, with oneself, taking that this is happening to me, and also one is not recognizing that this is impermanent, so it could change the next day. And similarly, when one meets with disagreeable experience and then one gets angry and upset and miserable because of it, again, one could see that what underlies that is ignorance. And then it's said, using the Abhidhamma scheme, one could say that ignorance becomes especially prominent on occasions of mental agitation or restlessness, on occasions of mental dullness and drowsiness, which is separate from the normal sleepiness or the healthy kind of sleepiness. But if it's the middle of the day or early in the day after a good night's sleep, then one is getting dull and drowsy and starting to nod off. And one recognizes that this is the working of ignorance. And then doubt, especially doubt about things in the Dharma, that is considered to be a manifestation, a strong manifestation of ignorance. Okay, we had See-you and then Stephen.
Bhante, this might not be a great question, but when you were talking about water as an element that's about cohesion, and then you were talking a little bit about subatomic particles, gluons, perhaps, and it occurred to me the question, what is it that binds the five aggregates together to make a person? Because you've talked about how you can't have a person which misses one of those aggregates.
Yeah. In fact, I don't, even though sometimes I speak like this, to go along with the common expression, I don't really like so much using this expression that the person is a combination of the five aggregates or a collection of the five aggregates. Because then you get the impression that you have material form here, feeling here, perception here, volitions here, consciousness here, and then you put them together and sort of stick them together, and then you get the person as a combination of the five aggregates. And then in this respect, the example of the carriage or car that's used is somewhat misleading. If you have a car, of course the car is a combination of the body parts, the motor, carburetor, steering wheel, exhaust, wheels, trunk, and so on. You could take the car apart. You could put the wheels here, you could put the motor here, you put the carburetor here, you put the exhaust pipe here, you put did I say the wheels? You put the trunk here, and you still have those parts. But you can't take a person apart into five aggregates and see them, the five aggregates lined up on the ground someplace. So it seems to me that experience always has a unity to it, an indivisible, inseparable unity, which one doesn't find in the case of a physical object like a car or a chariot. But one can analyze the experience in terms of five different aspects. So the material aspect, the aspect of feeling, the aspect of perception, the aspect of volition, the aspect of consciousness. And so when you explain it in that way, then one doesn't have to inquire about what holds the five aggregates together, since we could say that it's the life faculty which keeps the mental side of experience connected to the physical body. So when the life or vitality is cut off through the destruction of some vital organ like the heart, then the mental process can no longer arise based on the physical body. So then you just have a physical body without any awareness or consciousness, a dead body. But there's nothing that holds the mental factors, binds the mental factors to each other. The mental factors are always occurring within the indissoluble unity of experience. But we can just look at this experience from different angles, focusing on what is distinctive in that experience in terms of feeling, in terms of perceptual activity, in terms of the volitional quality of the experience, and then of course seeing behind that, sort of illuminating it all, the consciousness. That's my understanding. Richard, take the microphone.
This is a different sort of question. Is there anything analogous to the Antichrist in Buddhism? Is there any idea like of an anti-Buddha? The Antichrist idea is that there's this guy who people are going to mistake for Jesus, right? And then he's going to be an arch sinner and he's going to betray them all. They're all going to hell because they've made this mistake. Now, is there anything like that in Buddhism, somebody who people will mistake for the Buddha, right? Kind of like an anti-Maitreya maybe, right? Who will mislead them all, and they'll think they're becoming enlightened and they're not. Is there anything like that?
I don't think it focuses upon a particular individual who's supposed to be the anti-Buddha, but it's just that it said that I think it said sometimes in some of the texts that in a later time the Dhamma will get perpetually sort of diluted and distorted, and so there will come teachers will arise who will give distorted presentations of the Dhamma, and then that will lead to the decline and disappearance of the Dhamma. But it doesn't center upon one individual who's due to appear at a particular historical period and cause the ruin of the Dhamma. And then if there's anybody like who's opposed to the Buddha, it's Mara. But Mara is depicted as a contemporary of the Buddha, not some being who's going to come in the future.
And also you don't mistake Mara for the Buddha, right?
Generally, he doesn't appear in the form of a Buddha, though there's some later apocryphal literature in which Mara sometimes tries to deceive people by appearing as the Buddha.
Okay.
But this is not a kind of a prediction of something to happen in the future. It's just that there is... now it's a story in a commentary that the Buddha has been giving a discourse and speaking about the three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, non-self. And then there's a large audience, but there's one layperson in the audience who's listening to the Buddha, and he attains stream entry. Okay, then the discourse is over, everybody goes home. Then Mara thinks, these people who listen to the discourse, they're escaping from my grip. And now there's that layperson, I don't remember his name, let's just make up a name. Sila Gutta. Okay, Sila Gutta is about to escape from me. Let me try to get him back into my grip. And so then Mara takes on or manifests the form of a Buddha, and he goes to Sila Gutta's home, he knocks on the door. Sila Gutta opens the door and says, "Bhante, what a pleasure to see you." He bows down in respect. Then he says, "Is there anything I can do for you, Bhante?" And then Mara says to him, "This afternoon I was giving a discourse. I said that all conditioned things are impermanent. But later in the day I was considering that, and I realized I was a bit mistaken about that." So please don't take my statement too literally. There are some things that conditioned things that are not impermanent. And you know, I said that all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. Again, you know, when I was reflecting, I was mistaken about that. And so when he's saying this, then Sila Gutta knows, the Buddhas don't change their minds about these essential matters. So this can't be the Buddha. This must be Mara, the evil one, who's come to trick me. Then he says, I know you, Mara. And when he says that, when anybody says that to Mara, then Mara can't retain his disguise. Then he has to appear in his genuine Mara form. And so then Mara says, I'm defeated. The lay disciple Sila Gutta knows me. Then he disappears.
Thank you.
Okay. Abhaya? Is that? Excuse me? Abi. Okay. We'll make this the last question because there's a group that's supposed to come here at 1:30.
So my question was, is Mara a physical person, or is he a mental sort of like being?
A kind of representation.
Representation.
Or a symbol.
Symbol.
There's actually the commentaries explain, I think, 4 or 5 aspects of Mara. So one aspect is Mara as the defilements. So in this sense, Mara is taken just as a symbol or a metaphor for the mental defilements. Then Mara, another meaning of Mara, is identified with the 5 aggregates, because these are the objects of grasping. And so when one grasps the 5 aggregates, then one is sort of deceived into craving and clinging. Then the word Mara itself comes from the verb marati, which means to die. So the third meaning of Mara is as a metaphor, a symbol for death, or the whole realm of birth and death, samsara. So then Mara just has the symbolic is just the symbolic representation for the nature of samsara, a realm where one is born, grows old, and dies. But then the fourth meaning of Mara is in the text as a kind of malicious or malevolent deity. So it's said that Mara dwells someplace in one of the heavenly worlds. Mara in Buddhism is in no way connected with hell. And he has no interest in dragging beings down to hell, to be tormented in hell. Mara's task as a malevolent deity is just to keep beings trapped within samsara. So Mara will appeal to them. If they're seeking liberation, he'll say, don't seek liberation, but you can do good, wholesome, meritorious deeds and get reborn in heaven. So if somebody gives up the quest for enlightenment just to do good deeds and get reborn in heaven, Mara is happy. So we find the word Mara, the idea of Mara, used in these different senses in the text. So even after the Buddha's enlightenment, at least in some suttas, so now the Buddha is completely free from mental defilements, but Mara, for a number of years, I think 6 years after the enlightenment, 1 year after the enlightenment, Mara is still trailing the Buddha, trying to trick him, to deceive him, until the Buddha continually calls Mara's number, and then at a certain point, Mara gives up on the Buddha and goes for the others instead. People like me and you. Okay, I think we'll have to end for the day here. And so we'll continue with the sutta next week. And so let us we could end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. One.